Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch, and welcome to a quick introduction to vector graphics. Now, just last week, I introduced a program called Gravit.io. It's a web-based vector graphics program, and from the comments and a couple emails I got from it, I understand a couple people are struggling with how vector graphics works, and this makes sense. Vector graphics drawing is much different than raster or pixel graphics. Now, you're used to, when you're working with pixels or bitmaps or rasters, whatever you want to call them, you work with individual dots or brush strokes that represent individual dots. So you're basically doing a one-to-one relationship with the pixels you're working with, which works great. It's very intuitive. It allows some very, very powerful tools, but it doesn't work really well in certain areas, especially when you got to scale up or down your graphics. And that's where vector graphics really shine. Vector graphics are essentially formulaic graphics. You're drawing with mathematical equations, but how you actually use these can be a little bit unintuitive. So that's exactly what we're going to look at today. Very quick introduction to drawing using vector graphics. Now for today, I'm actually going to go ahead and use Gravit.io. The same program I talked about the other day. It's available at gravit.io, but you can use whatever graphics program you want. The process is going to be pretty similar. Other vector graphics packages include Inkscape, which is open source, free, and cross-platform. There's Adobe's Illustrator. There's Flash. There's Autodesk Graphic, which used to be called iDraw, and there's a few other packages out there. Corel Draw, for example. Use whichever one you want. The basic premise is all going to be the same. And again, the entire idea here is mathematical drawing. You're drawing in equations. Now, don't worry, you're not typing numbers in. It's nothing like that. But let's go ahead and just create a new canvas here. So here we are, and I'm going to show you a very quick, simple illustration, and it really perfectly shows how powerful vector graphics can be and how quick this can be. So you're going to come on up here and go to shapes. We're going to draw in shapes, and we're actually drawing in let's see, ellipses. So create an ellipse like so, press E again, E again, E again, and see the compound shape we just created there? We'll select them all, right? And we're just gonna take those and we'll either go to modify, create compound shape, and then we will turn this into a union. This is like a boolean operator where it'll take all these shapes together and turn them into a single shape, like so. So now if you look over here, we've got all of these little ellipses we drew with. You can see the individual composition. So I can actually modify this or move it around, and it will affect the end result. So you see how it's changing the shape result. And then we got our compound shape, which is actually, contains all of these things now. But once we've turned it into a compound shape, we can actually go one step further and basically turn it into a path. And a path is basically, this line segment. So it's the mathematical equation that defines the border of this particular shape. So now we have a path, and it doesn't have all the components that were used to make it. Now it is just basically a sequence of vertices, and we can see, come up here and edit them. So it's a bunch of points that go together to create our particular shape. But you can see we made a cloud. Very, very easy. We've got control handles here. We can manipulate, the exact extent of our curve. And that is how you make a basic shape using a vector graphics program. So you use normal geometric primitives, or you draw from scratch using the various different tools. So on top of using just raw shapes, I can also use lines. I can use a pen, sort of a freehand drawing tool. I can use their magic pen, and I can turn these into paths. So I could actually take a bunch of these, close them off, and create a cloud this way as well. But those are your primitives, basically. You're working with these various different shapes, and you can merge them together and create compound objects, or you can create paths, which turns into one individual shape that in turn you can use in other calculations, etc. So back to the point, let's go select and get rid of all this crap. All right, so now we are back to, okay, get rid of you, get rid of you. So now all we have is our cloud. And to make this a little bit easier to follow, I'll come over here and I will rename this guy. Come on, there we go, cloud. All right, so we have our cloud shape, and this is really made up of two things. It's got a border, or the line used to draw it, and it's got an intern. So first we'll go with the border. See right up here, we set the border, and we're gonna make it black on the outside. And now you can see the outside edge. We can do a bunch of things with that guy. So for example, we could make it much thicker if we wished. We could turn it off completely should we wish. We could change its color, etc. So that's kind of like the line you have used to draw it. At the same time, We've also got the fill color. So let's go back and turn our border off, but do our fill color. And our fill color can be anything. So we can do it as a solid color, like so. And every shape can only have one color or a gradient of colors, like so. So let's say we were dealing with, you know, a gray cloud, and let's instead go, boom, there you go. So now we've got a gradient radiated out. So let's zoom that out a bit, make it a little bit brighter. So we basically just made ourselves a storm cloud with almost no effort. Now we can move that, we can move the pivot point of our gradient like so. And if we want, put our border back on, and let's make this guy white. Where's white? White's right there. Boom, there is a cloud. And that is how simple and easy it is to make a single shape object. And of course, this isn't that advanced. There's not a lot going on here. So let's do something a little bit more complicated. We're actually going to do a sword blade really quickly. Now, there's 100 million ways you can go about creating just about anything. But in this case, I'm going to show you one way that you could do it. And we're going to use the tools we just used, but we're also going to show you how to layer things on top of each other. You have to think when you're dealing with vectors as building compound shapes, building detail on top of detail on top of detail. It's like working in construction paper. You know, like the beginning of South Park, where it shows, you know, them being made piece on piece on piece on piece. That's essentially how you draw in vector graphics, and South Park is ultimately drawn that way. So now what I'm going to do is start with a rectangle, like so. And on top of said rectangle, we want to add another shape, which is a triangle, like so. No rotation. I'm not going to get this exactly right, so I need to zoom in a bit here. All right. Move that guy up, like so. Grab our two shapes, modify, and again, compound shape, and then union. So now that turned those two things where they overlap into one particular shape. Now we didn't get exactly what we want because we have this, this double edge here. So we're gonna actually want to go into edit mode here. Oops, I didn't convert to a path yet. So we don't want to go into edit mode. We want to select, grab these guys, our compound shape, right click, convert to path. We shall call said path blade, like so. And let's start off dark. Oh, that's the border. Make that black. All right. So our border is black. Our fill color is a dark gray. There. You got the very basic tenements of a sword. It's not the most exciting sword you've ever seen, but it is in fact a sword. Okay. So now we've got a couple of issues. First off, I have some more detail up here than I want. You see, we've got this extra swing here, and we're built up of pieces. We're going to come in, select our path, edit, and we'll just grab one of those points and get rid of it. Do the same down here and get rid of it. All right, and now I want to go to the bottom of said blade, and I want it to taper in a bit. So we're just going to grab that corner, and yeah, probably a bit more. Oh, you're doing everything. I hate the controls on this thing sometimes. All right. There. So now we have a tapered in sword with a black outline on the outside, but that doesn't really look that convincing yet, does it? Well, no, not really. So now we need to add a little bit more detail to this guy. So what are we going to do here? Well, first off, we're going to add a blade's edge. And here's where you're going to start thinking about how you work shapes together. So I'm going to take this guy right here, and I'm actually going to duplicate it. So just Control C, Control V. And we'll bring that over here. And we're going to call this guy, so which one is selected? Okay. So the newly created guy, we're going to rename it. Come on. Slow ass double click, blade edge. And now I actually want to take blade edge, copy it, and paste it over top of itself. Like so. We want them to be an exact copy, exact overlap. I think that's about right. All right, perfect. Now what we're going to do is actually transform all right, come on. Okay, that's really annoying. Can I hurry? There. Blade edge inner. All right, and we're going to come up here to transform. Drop the box down. We're actually going to scale that width to 90% and height to 90%. And apply. So now we have an inner version like that. And I'm just going to take edit mode and grab these two bottom points and drag them all the way to the bottom. In a bit. Oops, just want one in. Other one in. In some ways, it's a lot like working with polygons. If you've worked with polygons before, you'll have an idea what we're dealing with. And I actually want that to go on the outside, like that. Okay, so we're gonna look up the side of our shape. And you see we've just kind of got it slightly inset version. We also want to take these two edges and bring them up here. So, and you are redundant, go away. Okay, so you see what we've got now? We have our kind of a double set sort, and I want to go back to, I want to be in select mode, I select the outside guy, shift select the inside guy, and we're going to do another one of those create compound shapes, but this time we're actually going to do a subtraction. So it took the one away from the other. So see, now what we've got is an identically sized version of our other blade, but now as a single shape. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to right click, convert to path, and we will call this path blade edge. And now what I want to do is I don't want any border at all. No border for you. And we're going to take that guy back and drag him directly over top of our original blade, like so. Okay, not too exciting so far, but now you're going to see where you add your subtle details when you're working this. So now to highlight the difference between the two, so we can give ourselves a bit of an edge look, what we want to do is change the color slightly. We're going to make this guy slightly lighter. So come on up there, and there you can see. So you've got a lighter edge, and we could call that a day. We could call that our blade done. Not really that exciting yet, though. But instead, there's a couple things that are really important to understand here. This is being drawn by drawing the edge, like so that outer shape that we drew, this blade edge, on top of our blade. So I can hide that. So there's just our edge. There's just our blade. And those two work together to make a more composite shape. Now, it's important, though, that the blade edge is in front of the other one. And this is going to be various different, handled in different ways in various different packages. But they will all have some kind of a concept of depth. So for example here, this works because it's being drawn on top of the base layer. Again, this is just like working in construction paper where you layer things on top of things on top of things. So now what we want to do is make sure that it's at the front, and it already is, but if it was back, so you can see we can push it backwards. So now it's actually, the blade edge is being drawn, and you can see it drop down in the order here. It's being drawn after the blade, so the blade is obscuring it completely, so that's useless to us. So that's why the order of drawing makes sense. And it could be called Z order or various other things, but basically you want to make sure that your detail layers are being drawn on top of your underlying layers. Now this is a little harsh. This is way worse than what we actually want it to be, and this metal is a little boring. So what we're going to do is take our base sword, so blade, and we're going to change the fill here to a gradient. Like so. Here we'll do a radial gradient. And we'll change from black to a dark gray. Gray. There. That's a bit more metally. And our outside layer, though, what we're going to do is we're going to keep it kind of like what it is, but we're going to change the opacity here. So it's not being drawn perfectly over top. What we want to do is instead only draw, I don't know, 60%, 50%. So the other line of color draws through. So a little bit better now. The next thing we're going to do is start getting into effects. And what we're going to do here is come down here to the effects, and this is going to be available in everything, but it's going to be a slightly different look no matter how you look at it. And what we're going to do is apply a blur effect, and you can change the amount, but it makes it less edged, as you can see. So it makes it look like a more smooth transition between the two colors, and gives you a much better result in the end. like so. So there is a blade a bit more lit, and I could keep going. You know, you do like, we could draw a line down the middle, apply glow to it to give it as a bit of an edge or a bevel look. Well, here, I'll do that really quickly. So we could add a line like here, draw it from there to there. So you can give it a bit more size so you can see the, like that. So there's a line down the middle. It's a little bit big. Let me just come in here and edit it. We'll bring it back up. All right, so there's our, you know, center of our sword. But again, that's a little too, I don't know, drawn. So what I'm going to do, we'll select our path that we just created there. Again, we'll apply effect. A lot of times you actually just end up using blur, but you can also use an outer glow or an inner glow. So for example, we can use an outer glow, give it that raised look, and we can actually even just get rid of the border altogether. And now you can see, oops, come on, outer glow. All right, I should not need a border to make that work. Here, I'll drop the border down. There. So you got your line going down that I don't really like the end result. I also don't like the fact that it's yellow. But you get the idea. You sort of just keep adding more and more details as you need to your device, and we could actually make that look a lot better just by changing that border color to the same gray. And there you've got, you know, more detail to your blade. And you just keep adding these layers and layers and layers on top of each other, but you're not going to want to deal with these things. So right now we've got the blade edge, the blade, and the path. And each one of these things is just a path. It's a very complicated and self-shaded shape, and they need to stay separate because they each have their own coloring detail. And all of those colors work together to give us the detail that we've got on this guy. But what we want to do is just take everything and group them. So we're going to modify and just group selection. And you'll see it just collapsed them all together into a single thing, but each of the pieces is still there. So you're still dealing, you're still, you know, using these different pieces of construction paper. They're all, you know, their own separate color, their own separate shade, but you just bring them all together as a group, and now you could use that group as sword. But I could actually call that sword blade, and we could do another one for a hilt, and then we could take that group and merge that group together into a sword. So it really is along that lines of the construction paper, let's say allegory, but that's not the right word I'm looking for. The metaphor, if you're working with construction paper, carries over when you're working with vectors. And this is how you add your shading, your small details, etc. So for example, if we wanted to add a little bit of a hint of, say, the sun glaring off of this corner right here, we just kind of come up here. So we want to add a sun glare to this blob right here. We'll just come up here and go, I'll do it freehand for now. This is going to be really sloppy, but magic pen, and I'm just going to do, oops, oh yeah, that's really sloppy. Do it. All right, so it's closed path, and we're just going to take that particular shape. We're going to fill it with a white, like so, and then we can probably position it slightly better than I did. But this is how you add highlights, shadows, etc. So we've got this detail now over top of our underlying surface. And then you mostly just play with the opacity. So we got our fill is actually only at 47. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. And then again, glows and blurs are going to be your best friend. And there's how you add the detail of, you know, sunlight glinting on something. And you can do this a bit more. We'll actually switch this to, let's see, grab my guy, fill. I'm going to fill you with straight out white. Be a little bit more profound. And we could rapidly come in here, change that shape up a bit. And that's how you burn shadows onto a shape. It's a very terrible example. But it just all kind of works together, and you can see how it's modifying the underlying shape that you've got there. So that's how you add contour, shadow, shading. And you know, if you were making an eyeball, it's the same thing. You do one shape on the other, and then you do the other shape on top. So you do the iris on top of the underlying eyeball, and done. It's you know, it's a different way of thinking, but the end result is actually quite powerful, because now I've got this shape that I'm drawing in a very resolution independent way. So I could come up here now, and I can export this as a PNG. Now they do it as size, but you can also do this in a lot of programs. You can say export it to this pixels by that pixels. but I can come out here and export it as, whatever setting I want. So 3 times size, export, and I've got a PNG file that's 3 times the size of normal. Or I can come back and do it at the regular size, but they're all going to be, so I'll go back here, and I will export it, and I'll do this at 1 time. So if you're doing retina versus non-retina display graphics, for example, now I've just did the second setting, and boom, exact same level of detail. So there's where it's nice. Once you start exporting your files out to a bitmap or a PNG format that you're going to use in your game, you can quickly resample, resize, but you don't lose any fidelity. Whereas if I take this guy now and I zoom it up, I can do that as an exercise for the reader. All right, I think that'd be in my downloads folder. So downloads. All right, so I got a raw shape here. And I'm going to now take that into, so there's the 2 shapes we're dealing with. Other than the size, exact same level of detail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that little guy, the non-vector export, and I will open this guy in paint.net, a typical bitmap program. All right, so image, resize, 200%. Save as 3 PNG. And see what just happened? We got jaggies now. And that's what happened. That's the big special magical detail between the two is as you resample or resize vector graphics, it's always crisp, it's always perfect because it's represented by a mathematical equation. But once you're dealing with bitmap or raster graphics, look what happens to that line. See? Line there versus line there. No jaggies versus jaggies. And there is where vector graphics really shine. When you need to make multiple resolution versions, that is where vectors really work well. And they also work nice for flowing edges. You can draw a smoother line in a vector graphics program than you can by hand 9 times out of 10. They work a little bit less well when you're looking at freeform. There's a lot more freedom in working with raw pixels, but I hope you gave an idea of what you're dealing with when you're dealing with vectors. Again, not even close to a comprehensive tutorial. Doing, learning the details, learning the tricks, learning how to make layers of things is just an absolute chore. Now, there's a nice website out there that's, I think it's called 2D Game Art, something like that. It'll be the first one. Yeah, 2D Game Art Guru. And this guy's done a ton of tutorials on using Inkscape, that free program, but it'll apply to any graphics program. So this style you see, like this fish here, this graphic could have been done in a 1.5 minutes type thing. This is not a lot of work. This is a simple shape with a couple of compound shapes over top of it. So you take two circles, something to bridge them in the middle, put that together as a boolean, overlap a circle, overlap another circle, draw a crescent over top for the shading. Up here you can see another circle was used for shading. So it's just the technologies we use right here. So this is a circle layered over top of another circle with a blur filter on the outside edge. You can see another one was put down here to give this reflective look, but again, it's just another circle, another blur, and that's all you're doing. You're just layering these things on top of each other. But this guy, 2dgameartguru.com, has a nice comprehensive set of tutorials which will take exactly what we looked at today, the small details we looked at today, and will show you how to take them one step further, the practicality of it. But vector graphics, especially actually if you're not particularly talented at graphics, you can actually pull off a whole lot. So if you can't draw, you can still make some pretty passable art using the vector graphics style. Just think of it like assembling using construction paper, and that all of your detail has to come from layering. And once you get that whole layering thing down, it's actually a pretty powerful way to work. All right, I hope that made sense. A little off the topic of what I normally do, but if you did like that, please do click like. And we do all kinds of game development stuff here. So if you're interested in game programming tutorials, game dev news, game engine reviews, etc., please do click subscribe, and I hope you'll like what you see. All right, that's it for now. See y'all later.